Alright, Bond lovers, cinephiles, and nostalgia junkies, today's story is a treat because we're talking about one of the most iconic men to ever hold a martini glass on screen, none other than Pierce Brosnan. And guess what? He's just hinted at returning to the James Bond universe. But before you get too excited, there's a twist, and it's not as simple as him just slipping back into that tuxedo. Let's set the stage. The James Bond franchise has been alive and kicking for over 60 years. That's right. Since Dr. No dropped in 1962 with Sean Connery, Bond has been blowing up cars, charming spies, and saving the world in style. Through the decades, every actor who's played Bond has brought their own flavor. Sean Connery was smooth and commanding. Roger Moore gave us humor and charm. Timothy Dalton leaned into grit. Daniel Craig went full intensity, and then we had Pierce Brosnan. Now, Brosnan took over the role in 1995 with GoldenEye. And let me tell you, that was a massive turning point for Bond. The Cold War was over, the franchise was kind of searching for its identity, and along comes Brosnan, a perfect mix of suave and steel. He was good-looking, he was witty, but he could also throw a punch and make it look believable. GoldenEye wasn't just a hit at the box office, it also became a pop culture phenomenon. Some of you might even remember the GoldenEye video game on the Nintendo 64. That game practically raised a whole generation of Bond fans. Brosnan went on to star in 4 Bond films: GoldenEye, 1995, Tomorrow Never Dies, 1997, The World Is Not Enough, 1999, and Die Another Day, 2002. Each of these had those signature elements: insane stunts, killer theme songs, remember Madonna's Die Another Day? And Brosnan delivering lines with that calm confidence. He was the gentleman spy for the late 90s and early 2000s. But here's the thing about Bond: every era eventually ends. By the time Die Another Day came out, critics were saying the franchise was getting too over the top. Ice palaces, invisible cars, laser beams from space. You name it, Bond was doing it. And that's when producers decided to go in a different direction. They wanted something grittier, more realistic. Enter Daniel Craig with Casino Royale in 2006, a complete reboot, a tougher Bond, less polished, more brutal. And that worked, too. Craig's Bond gave us Skyfall, one of the biggest hits in Bond history, and ended with No Time to Die in 2021. So, flash forward to today. Daniel Craig has hung up his tux. Fans are debating endlessly who the next Bond should be. Some say Henry Cavill, others love the idea of Idris Elba, Regina Page, or Aaron Taylor-Johnson. Some say it's time for a woman to take the lead. Amid all this noise, Pierce Brosnan drops a little bombshell. He'd love to return to the Bond universe, but with a catch. Brosnan isn't saying, "Give me the Walther PPK again, and let me be Bond." What he's saying is that if the right story came along, he'd be open to playing some part in the franchise. Maybe as an older, retired Bond. Maybe as a mentor figure. Maybe even in a spin-off where we see what happens to agents once they're no longer active. And fans? They are eating this up. Think about it. The MCU has taught us about multiverses, about older heroes coming back. Just look at Spider-Man. No Way Home. Imagine a Bond movie that pays tribute to its legacy by bringing back a beloved 007 like Brosnan in a clever way. He could even act as a connective tissue between generations of Bonds, a passing the torch moment. Can't you just see it? Brosnan, gray hair, sharp suit, still exuding that dangerous charm, sitting across from the new Bond and giving one last piece of advice. That's cinema gold right there. But Brosnan is smart. He made it clear that he doesn't want to return for a cheap cameo. He doesn't want to be a nostalgic gimmick. If he comes back, it has to be meaningful. It has to elevate the story. And honestly, that's what makes this idea so exciting. Now, let's talk about legacy. Brosnan's Bond era sits in a unique place. For older fans, Sean Connery will always be the original and maybe the best. For the newer generation, Daniel Craig redefined Bond. But Brosnan? He's the bridge. He carried Bond through the 90s, kept him stylish, relevant, and charming in an era that was changing rapidly. His films made Bond a household name again for younger audiences. That's why his potential return carries weight. It's not just another actor popping back in. It's a piece of Bond history reconnecting with the present. And let's not forget, Brosnan has had an incredible career outside Bond. From rom-coms like Laws of Attraction, to action flicks like The November Man, to musicals like Mamma Mia, this man has range. He's also shown he doesn't take himself too seriously, poking fun at his suave image when needed. All of that adds to the appeal of seeing him back in the Bond universe in some creative way. Meanwhile, the hunt for the next Bond continues. The producers, Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson, have been very clear. Casting Bond isn't just about who looks good in a tux. It's about who can carry the franchise for the next decade or more. That's why they're taking their time. And in the middle of this long-waiting game, hearing Brosnan's willingness to return is like a breath of fresh air for fans. It reminds us that Bond isn't just about the next face, it's about a legacy of storytelling, about reinvention while honoring the past. That's when Timothy Dalton got the job. So Brosnan's journey with Bond has always been a mix of fate and timing. And here we are again, talking about timing, whether the timing might finally be right for Brosnan to make a comeback, even in a different role. So, what do you think, listeners? Can Bond work if it revisits its past and brings back an older star? Or is Bond better left as a constantly reinventing, fresh character with no looking back? Personally, I think seeing Brosnan in a dignified, mentor-style role could be the perfect nod to fans who grew up watching him. It's like saying, yes, the past mattered. Yes, it shaped who Bond is today. And one last thought, Bond has always been about evolution. From the Cold War spy thrillers of Connery's era to Craig's gritty psychological deep dives, the character adapts to the times. Maybe now, in a world obsessed with cinematic universes and callbacks, the evolution of Bond is to actually acknowledge its own history. If so, Pierce Brosnan could be the key to unlocking a whole new chapter. So whether or not Brosnan returns, one thing is certain, his era as Bond will never be forgotten. Because James Bond may change faces, but legends, well, legends stay forever. Studio Microphone, and that, my friends, is your Bond story of the day, only on Radio 1 International, where global pop culture always has a place at the table.